The wind had a sharpness to it that late October afternoon, slicing through the gray light like a whisper of something long forgotten. Melissa adjusted her scarf as she stepped through the rusted cemetery gates, the iron creaking behind her in a way that suggested they hadn't opened in weeks. The smell of earth, wet leaves, and old stone settled thickly in the air, and a veil of fog clung to the ground, moving like low, dragging fingers across the moss-covered tombs. She hadn't intended to come to this cemetery. In fact, it wasn't on any map she'd looked at. Her drive through the countryside had started as a detour, an impulse to take the long road home, to escape the noise of the city and, perhaps, the noise of her own thoughts. Her grandmother had died 2 weeks ago, and since the funeral, Melissa had been unable to shake the feeling that something was following her. Not a person, not even a presence exactly, just something, a weight in the air, an itch in the spine, a sense of breath behind her neck when she stood too long in the shower, dreams that started in her bedroom and ended in pitch-black soil. It was that sense that had pulled her off the main road and onto an unmarked dirt path, no wider than a single car, where tree branches scraped the windshield like fingers trying to get in. She hadn't questioned it at the time, only that when she saw the cemetery gate standing just beyond a clearing, she had known she was supposed to stop. Now, standing at the threshold, she wondered if she'd made a mistake. The cemetery looked ancient. The stones were crooked, some nearly swallowed by the earth, others leaning against each other like drunks after a wake. A heavy willow tree loomed at the center, its branches twisting low over a cracked stone bench and a circular path of graves, as though it had been planted to guard them. A few ravens scattered from its branches as Melissa stepped closer, startled by her presence. She flinched. Then she noticed something strange. One of the graves looked off, not just old or decaying like the others. This one was pristine, clean, almost too clean, like someone had just finished washing the stone with bleach and water. The ground around it was slightly disturbed, as if it had been dug up recently and refilled. The headstone stood perfectly upright, without a speck of moss or grime. The name on it, she didn't recognize it. She crouched, studying the dates. They didn't seem unusual. Nothing about the grave stood out besides how untouched it appeared compared to the rest. A chill moved across her shoulders. She pulled her coat tighter and looked around. Nothing but stones and fog and silence. She turned and walked the circular path around the tree, reading the names of the long dead. Some stones were illegible, worn away by wind and time. Others bore symbols she didn't recognize, circles within circles, jagged crosses, looping runes that looked more like scratches than letters. She took her time, not sure what she was looking for. Just something. When she came back around, the clean grave was still there, still looking wrong. Melissa stood staring at it for a while. The fog thickened. The sun had dipped behind the hills. It was getting late. She left. That night, she dreamed of the grave. In the dream, the cemetery was darker. The willow tree was dead, its bark split open like a mouth mid-scream. She stood the clean grave again, and there was a sound beneath the soil, a slow, scratching sound, like nails dragging up the inside of the coffin. She woke up gasping, sweat soaking her sheets. The next day, despite herself, she returned. She wasn't sure why. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was something deeper. But she took the same dirt path, through the same twisting trees and parked in the same clearing, this time with a flashlight in her coat pocket. The cemetery was exactly as she'd left it. But when she reached the clean grave, she stopped dead. The name on the headstone had changed. It was no longer the unfamiliar name she'd seen the day before. Now it read something else entirely. Someone named Thomas Delaney. She knew that name. He had lived down the street from her as a child, died in a car accident when he was 22. She remembered the way the whole neighborhood went quiet for weeks afterward. He'd been popular, bright, everyone liked him. She frowned, leaning in. Was she remembering it wrong? Maybe it had said Thomas yesterday, too. Maybe she hadn't looked closely. It was possible. She'd been distracted. The light was dim, but she didn't believe that. That night, the dream came again. This time, she wasn't alone. Someone stood across the grave from her, shrouded in shadow. They didn't move, didn't speak, but Melissa could feel the weight of their stare. The scratching from below the ground was louder now, almost desperate. She didn't sleep well. The next morning, she returned. Again, this time with a camera, she took photos of the grave. The name now was Helen Ward, a woman she'd worked with for a few months before Helen had transferred to another branch. She had died 2 years ago. Cancer. Melissa stared at the stone for a long time, her breath fogging in the cold morning air. She compared the photos on her phone. Yesterday, Thomas. Today, Helen. 2 different people, 2 different names. She checked the ground. It looked freshly disturbed again, like someone had come in the night and shoveled the earth, then packed it neatly back into place. No footprints, no sign of anyone having been there. She stayed longer this time, walking the rest of the cemetery, looking for any clues. Nothing. The other graves hadn't changed. Still crumbling, still ancient. Only the clean grave stood out. Impossibly clean, impossibly fresh. That night, the dream returned. She was standing at the grave again. The figure across from her was closer now. She could see the edge of their face, pale, sunken, almost rotten. They whispered something, but no sound came out. Then they pointed to the ground, to the soil between them. The scratching was a frenzy now, like something trapped, something angry. Melissa woke with her hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. She didn't go back the next day, not because she didn't want to, but because she was afraid of what name she'd see next. But by evening, she gave in. The cemetery felt darker, colder. The fog hung heavier. She approached the grave with her heart thudding in her chest. New name, Kevin Lowell. She remembered that name too. He'd been her high school math teacher. Killed himself when she was a senior. She still remembered the announcement over the intercom. The way everyone went silent, the rumors afterward, that he'd seen something, that he couldn't live with it. She hadn't thought about him in years, and now his name was on the stone. Melissa took another photo, backed away slowly. She left the cemetery with her skin crawling. She didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the grave, the figure, the soil rising in slow, heaving breaths, like something beneath was trying to break through. The dreams blurred into waking. She started seeing shadows in the corners of her apartment, started hearing knocks on the walls, always 3 knocks, always after midnight. She tried not to return. She lasted 2 days. When she came back, the name had changed again and again. Every day after that, she came back, and every day a new name, Each name was someone she knew or had known. Some were friends, some were co-workers, some were barely acquaintances she'd spoken to once at a party or passed in a hallway years ago. Each time, the soil around the grave looked slightly more disturbed, as if whatever was beneath was getting closer to the surface. Melissa began keeping a list. She tracked the names, the dates. She mapped them, looking for a pattern. There wasn't one. Not that she could find. The only pattern was that the names were people connected to her. And the dreams got worse. The figure in the dream was right beside her now. Their mouth moved, but no sound escaped. Their skin was gray and cracked like dry clay. When they reached for her, their hand was bone-thin and shaking. She woke with bruises on her wrist. The final straw came when she saw her neighbor's name on the stone. A quiet woman named Esther, who lived 2 doors down. Melissa saw her every morning on the porch feeding the birds. The day after she saw Esther's name, the police were outside. Heart attack, they said. Peaceful. Melissa didn't believe that. The name on the grave changed again the next day. Another friend, another death, and the grave was shifting. She noticed it one evening just before dusk. The entire stone had moved several inches to the left. She was sure of it. She had taken photos, measured the placement against the others. The grave wasn't just changing names, it was moving, and it was getting closer to the path, closer to the bench, closer to where Melissa always stood. She stood in the fog and stared at the stone, her heart thudding like a drumbeat in a funeral procession. The ground shifted beneath her feet. The dream that night was darker than any before. She wasn't just standing by the grave anymore. She was in it. Melissa woke with the taste of soil in her mouth. Her sheets were twisted around her legs like a winding sheet, and the smell of earth clung to her skin. She didn't remember getting into bed. She barely remembered falling asleep. Her dreams had grown more real with each passing night. Vivid, tactile, overwhelming. But this was something else entirely. This was a feeling that lingered long after waking, a sense that she'd been somewhere else, somewhere below. She checked her phone. 3:17 a.m., the same time the knocking always came. She waited, holding her breath, eyes locked on the wall. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, exactly like every other night for the past 2 weeks. She sat frozen, heart pounding in her chest. Her apartment was dead silent, no traffic, no hum of city life, nothing but those 3 knocks, and then silence again. She didn't answer. She never did. But she knew it wouldn't matter. Whatever it wasn't waiting for an invitation anymore. She didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, she returned to the cemetery before sunrise. The sky was still dark, tinged only faintly with bruised blue at the horizon. The fog was thicker than ever, swallowing the headstones as she walked. Her flashlight cut through it in pale slices, revealing flashes of stone and bare branches. When she reached the grave, she stopped. The name had changed again. She expected that by now. What she didn't expect was how much the grave had shifted. It was no longer aligned with the others. It had moved a full 3 feet toward the path, breaking the perfect ring around the willow tree. The soil around it was cracked, uneven, as though something beneath had been pushing upward. She stared at the name, Carl Trent. She hadn't thought about Carl in over a decade. He'd been her boss at her first job out of college. Gruff, unsmiling, but always fair. He'd died of a stroke 5 years ago. She remembered sending flowers to his memorial, but there it was, his name carved in clean, sharp letters, the stone shining like it had been polished that morning. Melissa took a step back, then another. The cemetery felt wrong now, not just strange or eerie, wrong, like something was watching from behind the stones, just out of view, like the fog itself was breathing. She turned and left, her pace quickening with each step. She didn't look back. Back at home, she opened her notebook. The list of names had grown to 2 pages. She wrote Carl's down, then stared at the growing column of dates beside each one. The dates of death were accurate, every single one, except for the last 2. Those 2 people weren't dead. Yet. Esther's name had shown up a day before her heart attack. The one before that, David, an old classmate she'd lost touch with, his name had appeared 3 days before he died in a freak construction accident. Melissa had only learned about it after seeing the obituary in her hometown paper. Now, she saw the pattern. The grave didn't just mark the dead, it marked the soon-to-be dead. Each name was a warning. She felt sick. The grave was predicting death. No, not predicting, naming it, choosing it, like a curse etched into stone. She had to know more. She started researching the cemetery, town records, historical archives, nothing. No mention of it anywhere. It didn't show up on any map. No name, no deeds, no records. It was like it had never existed. But it was there, undeniable. And every day the grave shifted closer. She tried to tell someone, her friend Sarah, a nurse at the local hospital. Melissa told her everything about the grave, the names, the dreams. Sarah didn't believe her. Of course she didn't. She smiled politely, told Melissa to get some rest. Maybe see someone, maybe talk to someone. Melissa didn't blame her. It sounded insane. Until Sarah's name showed up 3 days later. Melissa drove straight to the cemetery at dawn. The fog hadn't lifted, and the sky was the color of rotted flesh. She saw the stone before she reached it, its gleaming face like a beacon in the gloom. Sarah Whitaker. Melissa's hand shook as she took the photo. She called Sarah immediately. No answer. She drove to her apartment. Still no answer. Sarah died later that day. Car accident. A semi jackknifed on the interstate. Melissa watched the news report on repeat, her face pale and hollow in the glow of the screen. The grave had known. It always knew. She stopped sleeping after that. She drank coffee until her hands trembled. She walked her apartment in circles, memorizing every creak in the floorboards, every shadow in every corner. She kept her curtains closed and her lights on, but still the dreams came, still the knocking, and the grave kept moving. 4 feet, then 5. It was halfway to the bench now. Melissa started marking its location with chalk lines. Every day a new line, every day a new name. She no longer needed to look them up. She knew each one. The barista at the cafe she went to twice a week. The man who fixed her dryer last month. A girl from high school who had sat behind her in biology. People who had brushed against her life like dust motes in sunlight. Some she hadn't seen in years. Some she'd seen yesterday. One by one, they all died, and the grave got closer. Melissa tried staying away, tried breaking the cycle. It didn't work. The dreams came stronger, the figure in them clearer. It wasn't just watching now, it was speaking. She couldn't hear the words, not fully, but the shape of them pressed against her mind like cold fingers. It was warning her, or maybe it was promising. Either way, she woke screaming. Then came the worst discovery. One morning, She returned to the cemetery and found not one grave, but two. The original clean grave, still shifting, still naming, and beside it, just beside it, another grave. Smaller, freshly dug, no headstone, just a wooden post hammered into the soil, a blank slab of stone lying beside it, waiting. Melissa stumbled back, bile rising in her throat. It was making room for someone else. She stared at the blank stone, heart thudding in her ears. The fog around her pulsed, thicker now, suffocating. She turned and ran. She didn't return for 2 days. She told herself she was done, that it wasn't her responsibility, that she couldn't stop it, that maybe if she ignored it, it would go away. But deep down, she knew better. The dreams didn't stop. The knocking grew louder, 3, then 6, then 9, always in threes. The third night, she caved. She went back. The new grave had a headstone now, no name yet, just a date, the next day's date. And the first grave had a name, Travis Meyer, Melissa's ex-boyfriend. They hadn't spoken in years. She had no idea where he lived. She looked him up, found him on Facebook, still alive. She tried to message him, warn him. He didn't respond. He died the next day, heart failure, 34 years old. Melissa sat in her dark apartment, staring at the wall. There was no stopping it, no way to prevent it. The grave chose, and the grave took. It didn't matter if she warned them. It didn't matter if she ran. The names still appeared. The deaths still came. She started checking the grave twice a day, morning and night. The shifting accelerated. The first grave was now only a few feet from the bench, from where she always stood. And the second grave was complete, stone-carved, soil-packed, and now it had a name. She approached slowly, stomach churning, breath tight. The second grave now bore the name of someone she didn't know, Jacob Adler. She frowned. That was new. She didn't recognize it. She checked her list. No Jacob Adler. She went home and searched the name. Nothing. Until later that night, she got a call. An old friend. Her cousin had died. Freak accident. Gas leak. His name? Jacob Adler. They'd met once, years ago, at a wedding. One conversation, a joke, a handshake. That was all it took. The grave had widened its reach. It no longer needed strong connections. Now a brush was enough, a glance, a laugh, a passing word. Melissa realized what it meant. The grave was getting closer, not just to her, but to claiming her, consuming every life she'd touched, no matter how briefly. It was working its way inward, toward the center, toward her. She didn't leave her apartment after that, didn't speak to anyone, didn't touch anyone. She canceled all appointments, deleted her social media, shut off her phone. But still, the names came. Still, the grave shifted, and then one morning she returned and found only the second grave. The first was gone. The soil was flat, the stone missing. No trace of where it had been. But the second grave now gleamed, polished, clean, freshly disturbed, a single name, Melissa Carter. She stood frozen. Everything around her went silent. Even the fog seemed to pause. Her name, her grave. She knelt, touched the stone. It was warm. She could feel it vibrating faintly beneath her fingers like a heartbeat buried in the earth. A wind moved through the cemetery, and the willow branches twisted low around her as if reaching for her shoulders. She didn't move, because now she understood. This wasn't a warning. It was a summons. Melissa didn't remember how she got home. One moment, she was kneeling at the grave that bore her name, the soil warm beneath her touch, the trees whispering above her. The next, she was sitting on her couch, the front door hanging open behind her, her shoes soaked with dew, her hands streaked with dirt. The stone's image was burned into her mind. Melissa Carter, born 1991. Died. The date had been left blank, not empty, blank, as if time itself hadn't caught up with her yet, as if the grave was waiting, but not passively. It wasn't a place of rest. It was a door, one that had already been unlocked. Melissa stood slowly and walked to the bathroom. The mirror fogged over the moment she entered, even though she hadn't turned on any water. Her reflection was pale, hollow-eyed, lips bloodless. She looked like someone who'd already been buried. Behind her, the knocking began again. 3, then 6, then 9, then silence. She turned. This time, the sound had come from inside the apartment. She backed into the hallway. The lights flickered. Her phone, long powered off, buzzed suddenly on the counter. A single notification, grave updated. She didn't touch it. She didn't need to. She already knew. Her name, her date, completed. She stumbled out of her apartment and into the street. The sky overhead was strangely dark for midday, a storm churning on the horizon like a bruise slowly blooming across the sky. Thunder rolled, low and constant, like the deep growl of something waking up. She had to get back to the cemetery, had to see it again, had to know. She drove without thinking, without blinking, the landscape blurring around her. The road seemed longer than before, stretching endlessly, as though time had loosened its grip on the world. Trees bent unnaturally over the path, branches scratching the roof of her car like claws. When she arrived, the gates were open, wider than she'd ever seen. Waiting, she stepped out. The fog met her immediately, thick and alive, curling around her legs like cats. The cemetery had changed. The stones leaned away from her as she passed, as if in deference. The trees groaned under the weight of invisible watchers. The air pulsed with something ancient and cold and hungry. Her grave was right where she left it, no longer fresh, no longer waiting, complete. The date was etched now, clear and sharp, beneath her name. Died, October 31st, 2025, today. She fell to her knees, her legs unable to support her. The ground beneath her grave looked undisturbed, solid, but she could feel it moving. Something shifted just beneath the soil, something massive and slow and rising. She tried to stand, but the fog thickened, pushing her down, heavy and cold. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The willow branches coiled down from above like snakes, brushing her shoulders, tangling in her hair. A deep hum rose from the earth, low and terrible, vibrating through her bones. Then she heard the voice. It wasn't a sound, not exactly. More like a pressure in her skull, a whisper made of gravity and shadow. You saw, you watched, you stayed. Now you are part of it. She tried to scream, but no sound came. The earth cracked open beneath the grave, not like a cave-in, not like a collapse. It opened like a mouth. Darkness spilled upward, tendrils of black mist writhing and pulsing, wrapping around her ankles, pulling her forward. The grave split wider, impossibly wide, stone and soil crumbling into the void. The names on the other headstones began to shift, their letters sliding like liquid, reforming into new names, her parents, her childhood friends, people she hadn't seen in years. The fog burned as it touched her skin. She fought, clawed at the earth, tried to crawl away, but there was no ground left, only the grave and the thing beneath. It wasn't a person. It wasn't even a body. It was a shape, a thought, a hunger. And it had her name now, As she was dragged down into the pit, Melissa saw her own face staring back at her from the edge of the stone, not in reflection, not in vision, etched, as though it had always been there. The darkness swallowed her. The world went quiet. Then, a breath. Somewhere, far above the soil, a breeze stirred the branches of the willow tree. The fog lifted. Birdsong returned. A man walked into the cemetery. He was tall, mid-30s, with a camera slung over his shoulder. A hobbyist photographer, passing through the countryside, drawn to the strange path in the woods. He'd heard rumors about this place. No name, no history, no reason to exist. His GPS hadn't marked it, but here it was. He wandered past the crooked graves, pausing to photograph the moss-covered stones and broken angels. He liked places like this, quiet, forgotten. He reached the willow tree and saw the grave. It gleamed in the morning light. Pristine, new, Melissa Carter, 1991 to 2025. He paused, frowned, snapped a photo, then moved on. The sun climbed higher. Wind stirred the grass. Far beneath the earth, Melissa opened her eyes. She was not in darkness anymore. She was in a place of stone and shadow where the air felt thick and timeless. Shapes moved in the corners. Other figures, half-formed, whispering without mouths. She was one of them now. A soul without shape, caught in the roots of something much older than death. A vast network of graves stretching endlessly in every direction, each grave a name, each name a thread, each thread leading back to her. She remembered their faces, the barista, her teacher, Sarah, the ones who had died before her, the ones the grave had claimed. They were here, waiting, watching. Some reached for her, others turned away, but none spoke. There were no voices here, only memory, only hunger, and she felt it building, a pressure in her call, a pull, the same pull she had once followed when she first stepped off the road and into the woods, the same compulsion. She understood now. The grave had never been choosing. It had been searching, building, expanding, and she had helped it grow. Every time she returned, every time she read a name, every time she stayed silent, she had fed it, and now it wanted more. It used her name as a beacon, a signal, a flare. The first grave was gone, the second was hers. But a third had appeared, a simple stone, no name, yet. But it was already calling someone, a woman in a nearby town perhaps, a man driving past the woods, eyes catching the glint of rusted iron in the trees, a child with a dream they can't explain. The grave was still moving, still shifting, still reaching. Melissa screamed, but no sound escaped, because in that place, sound was useless. Only names mattered, only memory, only the promise of soil. In the world above, days passed, seasons turned. The cemetery remained, unchanged, unseen. But the grave with Melissa Carter's name never aged. It stayed polished, clean, inviting. And every so often someone new would arrive, drawn by dreams, by whispers, by something they couldn't name. They'd step through the gate, past the trees, toward the willow, and the grave would wait, because now it had many voices, not just Melissa's. It had all of them, and they were calling,